Thank you very much for your attention. First of all, also like Timo, I have a few reactions to what was mentioned previously. I totally agree with Timo that using meet criteria does not always mean that things will get more expensive. We have learned actually that companies that have organized themselves very well can be the cheapest and usually also have the knowledge to come up with the most clever ideas to get the highest scores on meet. So usually there is quite a high correlation. Also, I agree on the 60-40. So thus it's always between 40-60, 60-40. So that is the sort of the range if you're thinking about meet criteria to be used effectively. We have noticed that really works. Also use not more than 3. We totally agree. If you say, we want you to do 20 things at the same time, no one can do 20 things at the same time. Even women can't, I think. So, sorry. Okay. And of course, the point that I will come back to it later on, but think about total cost of ownership. So if you think about buying something, always think, for instance, like equipment, am I buying equipment or could I take this as a service? And if you buy things, think about the cost of adapting it. Think about the long run, think about maintenance, think about reliability, because we focus sometimes too much on what we buy instead of what will happen with it the next 15 years. And are those scenarios also causing extra costs, extra changes? What will happen with those things? Just the little remarks at the beginning. I will tell you a little bit about my organization, the organization I work for. I will tell you a little bit about the importance of having a strategy. Because thinking about meet criteria, I think, is not something you should do for each individual project. It's fun, but it's not very effective. I will show 2 meet criteria we use in procurement of infrastructure, and I will give you some examples. And I don't have enough time to have all the slides. I will skip a few. If there's a question about them, I can still bring it back. And you'll have the presentation at the end. So the presentation is available for everyone. So the organization I work for, almost 9,000 people. We spend about 4.2 billion, mostly on infrastructure and on those people. Just to know, the country, Holland, the Netherlands, is about 70% of the size of Lithuania. So it's, I think, quite similar in the scale of how we do business. Oh, that's the wrong button. Huh? So what are we responsible for? We are the executive agency of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. So we manage the highways. We manage all shipping channels, so that's the main rivers, and sometimes canals that are dug specifically for the shipping. And we manage the whole water system. So the water that comes from Germany or from Belgium, we have to bring it to the sea without drowning. And sometimes we want to keep the water because we need some drinking water or industry water, agricultural water. So we are the main network for the water, shipping, and transportation over the roads. So that is also the roles that we play. We do the building, we change these networks, we do the maintenance of the networks, and we do the traffic management or the water management. So we open things, we close things. That's the daily operation of what the organization does. And we have a little bit in the Caribbean. So that's for some colleagues, that's really fun to be able to go to the Caribbean. Now I will go to the part where I will stress the importance of having a strategy. Because it was already mentioned, the meet criteria or procurement should be about the rational way to spend funds. And luckily, there is a sort of realization with procurement, or especially also with policy people, that policy and procurement are friends. That you can use procurement as a policy instrument. Because I think it's, if you are responsible for the water quality in the country, and there's a policy not to use a certain substance from 2024, I think it is quite logical that you already start using in your contracts years before that the sentence, we stimulate not using this. You can stimulate it, you can forbid it, but you can use your contracts to stimulate the industry to move towards your policy goals. So if you want to be rational about spending money, just look at the policy goals of your own organization, not only by being as cheap as possible, but if I'm buying this, is there somehow a connection to one of the policy goals of my organization? So that's why I'm showing this graph. We have some policy goals, of course, on shipping, on the water management, but also on the environmental side. I will show those later on. So this is actually what was already mentioned. Procurement is, I think, the process to make your suppliers think about what is important for you. So it's not what is important for them. No, it's you give them a message. I want things to be reliable, or I want it to be delivered fast, or I want it to be delivered with very low carbon emission. Whatever signal you give off, you want them to think about something else than I want it to be delivered cheap. They should be thinking about, so that is what they think important. Working on a road without disturbing the traffic. That is what we are willing to pay a little bit extra for. So that's then you start the creativity in their organization to find solutions that fit your goals. And that's why I can't stress enough, if you do that in one project, they will spend a little bit of time thinking about it. But if they know you are going to do this every contract that has roadworks, and if you have made an agreement with other road management organizations in your own country, that let's all use the same way, let's use the same meet criterion, then the industry is starting, oh, wow, this is really serious. They must find this really important. And if they're all willing to pay a little bit extra for it, they can invest in solutions. They can spend time thinking about it. They can invest in machines. They can do whatever is clever. That's a nice sentence, whatever is clever. Yeah. So these are the two policies, well, there are three, but I will focus on the first two. The Paris Agreement, low carbon emissions is important for us all, I believe. The government has said we will be climate neutral in 2050 in the Netherlands. And we've said we will be climate neutral on the infrastructure side in 2030. And we need a lot of changes in our own organization, but especially in our suppliers. The second one is circular economy. In 2050, all road building, maintenance, building on rivers, it should all be done without using extra raw materials and without creating waste. So everything should be designed in a circular way. You can imagine things have to be different than we do them today. And we have two criteria that I will explain later on. So why is strategy important? I already mentioned the importance of doing it consistently, but I didn't tell how I got into this. It is important now, because I was responsible for the sustainability program within the agency of Rijkswaterstaat. I was that, but I think it started 10 years ago till about 3 years ago. We had a discussion with our top manager, because it's really important, sustainability, we should do something about it. The question then was, do you want to be seen as doing things with sustainability? Because it's quite easy. You can do all types of contracts. Sometimes you do a little bit of procurement with something green in it. You make a nice little book. Look, we do 20 nice projects with procurement in the criteria. Or do you want to have impact? And I was very glad that he said, no, I want to have a really good way of doing it. I want to be proud of what we achieve. So I want to have impact. Okay, so then we don't have to be working on sustainability with 8,000 people. We can find the specific niches where we think, oh, if we change that, we have the most effect. Then, of course, it starts with insight. If you think carbon emissions are important, then you look in your procurement, the total volume of whatever you procure. This is what you see here. From everything we procure, just driving around, sand, gravel, causes the most carbon emissions. asphalt, steel, but concrete. Those are the top 4. If you know that, you can just focus on those 4. You say, so that is where we want our suppliers to focus their energy on. That is where we want to stimulate innovation. Doesn't mean we neglect the other ones. The other ones you can just follow. If someone else, for instance, is really busy with some of the other subjects, we just take their criteria. But we also, our own organization focuses, we think about those types of contracts where we have the most potential effect. So this is what it's a focus on the types of procurement that really matter, that have the impact, that help you to reach your policy goal. And tell that to everyone. We are doing this in these types of contracts for the coming, in those types of contracts, we also think it's important, but we're not going to do anything special, but just basics. Create scale, really important. That's why it's important, I think, that there's many buyers working together and coming up with goals that you think, oh, that's a goal that's important for many of the buyers. Let's use the same incentive in the industry to reach a situation where all our suppliers start thinking about how can government or how can whatever, the buyer reach its goal. You have to promise industry, which is always difficult in a political situation, you will start with this, but you will be doing it for a certain period of time. Make them really believe that this is something that it's worth for them to invest in. And the last thing is important, I think. Don't have a nice group of clever government people that think about these subjects. Discuss this with your value chain, with your suppliers, with the representatives of industry. How fast can we go? How high should an incentive be? How high can we put it? Because they know the level of change that is achievable. And it's difficult because some parts of industry, not too fast, not too fast, because then things change. But you have, so it's the middle ground, because also from the buyer's point of view, you don't want to end up in a situation where you lose 80% of your suppliers. But losing 30% of your suppliers, and there are still 5 or 6 left that you think, well, they can go really fast. Well, then you can go a bit faster. Environmental people, think about ticking boxes. Also from the ministry, also from the EU. There are a lot of mandatory criteria, things you have to put in. You have to do this. You have to do it like this. You're not allowed to use this substance. You have to use this. It has a function, but it doesn't create change. In Holland, in general, our conclusion was it's actually the things that 99% of the time are already happening. So it's a lot of time that you spend to avoid the 1% of the cases where people would still use non-sustainable wood or would still use. So, and still, we still use some, they're always in there, but you just don't have to expect that change will come from those types of criteria. The change will have to come using carrots. You have to give them more chance to get the contract if they can show how clever they are. So that is what we believe in. That is the goal of having a meat criterion. You want them to think about it. And they say, if I can find a solution that is better than my competitor, then I have more chance to do these kinds of works. So that's the main thing why we think carrots are nicer than sticks. I already mentioned innovation and procurement. Yes, you can use procurement to reward some company that was really innovative, but there are limits, because anyway, the way we do procurement, in general, we only buy things that are already developed in a certain way that the supplier can prove that it works. Can you imagine if you build at the moment the biggest lock, so where ships come from the sea into the country, there are companies that say, wow, we have a really super new kind of material to make the doors. Much cheaper and much stronger. Look, but I have only this small sample. If it doesn't fit in the calculation models, if it's still not tested enough, if they bring up this kind of ideas in a real project, not going to happen. So next to the procurement phase, you need to have, especially if you are using meet criteria to stimulate your contractors to come up with new materials, new kinds of solutions, you will end up in a situation where they are really frustrated if you only have it in procurement. Because you want all kinds of new solutions, and now I have come up with a really clever idea, and you think it's too risky. Yeah, we think it might be a great idea, but can you imagine that we're just not doing it this time yet? We think it's too risky. So you need to have the second one, the cooperative relationship, next to using the meet criteria, where you in advance tell them there will be contracts, because I think you as well, there will be agendas where the industry can see what will be the tender procedures for the coming years. If they have a really clever idea, you want them to be able to come to you and say, you know, that project that will be on the market in the coming few years, I think I have a really clever idea. Can we test it somewhere? So you have to be willing to talk with individual companies to help them prove things that are really important for you. And this is totally possible within the European guidelines. Working with individual companies on innovative solutions, especially with, so there is a mix within in the new guidelines, the innovation partnerships, where you can do innovation, development, and buying at the same time. I'm not referring to that. Just you have to think about if you're really interested in creating change, and you use meet criteria, don't forget the second relation. This is just an example with the asphalt industry. It's this is the main way we do procurement of infrastructure. But I have to say in theory, because in practice things always go a little bit different. One of the important things is we want to buy things using functional specifications. So we say we want a bridge, which is already something to bring traffic to the other side of the river. But in practice, because of budgetary reasons, we say already it's a bridge, because tunnels are too expensive usually. So we say it's but whether it will be steel, glass, paper, whatever, if they can prove they fulfill the technical specifications, if they can prove they fulfill the functional specifications, that there's a calculation model that you can use, well, yeah, that is good enough for 20,000 trucks per day, that kind of traffic load, we think it's fine. So we don't decide all the technical details. Really. You look at me like it's unbelievable. Of course, then, it is really helpful if you do the design, build, and maintenance in one contract. That is just making them think not only about building it really cheap, but also building it in a way that it causes less disturbance for traffic, that it is easy to maintain, that it is cheap. It's just a different way. Sometimes we are forced to also have design and build. And then still, when you are comparing tenders, we use the total cost of ownership, so the total life cycle costs, as a way to compare the different offers. So you will always say, even if it's just a design, you will not just calculate how much does it cost to build this, how much does it cost to maintain this, how much does it cost to destroy this at the end. And then, of course, there are always contract specifications. Like a bridge has to be that high. And we also have, from the sustainability point of view, for instance, now we have the specifications for the asphalt. You can only use asphalt if the environmental footprint is lower than this. It's totally new, discussed with industry. I will show you a graph about it later. So that is not negotiable for an individual project. If it's an asphalt project, this sentence is in there. So that is not something you want a project manager to think about. No, that is the organization has decided we want this kind of change, and in all our projects we are putting in this minimum quality standard. And of course there are project-specific things that you have to think about. If you build a tunnel, energy consumption is huge, so we put in a maximum amount of energy. We're not telling them how to do it. Sorry, I'm lying. We expected them to do clever things like putting LED lighting in it, and we were disappointed they didn't. So in the end, we just put LED lighting in it. So just, so you have to think about these, but the cleverness is in using criteria to really making them think what other things are important. I will show two things, the carbon ladder and this thing. We don't have to show this, I think, but we use other meet criteria as well. Less hindrance for traffic, I already mentioned. I will go into the sustainability. I will skip this one. As was mentioned, we want them to be objective. Each individual contractor has to be able to calculate his own score. We don't want any relative comparison of tenders in the way we judge the documents. No. We really, I think officially it is possible, but they just don't want it. We want to have an objective, quantitative as possible way of comparing tenders. So you need a sort of scale that is defined, that is in the contract documents, that they can use themselves. I will offer this contract for 25 million, but I will get a deduction of 6 when they are comparing me to my competitor. So that in the end, does this work? Tender 1 offers the highest price, but because he offers more sustainability in quality, he is still awarded the contract. As I mentioned, the importance of cooperation. Cooperation between buyers, but also cooperation between buyers and sellers. Here you see probably the most important people in the building industry in Holland. It was a process of about, I think, 2 years, where they together discussed, if we think sustainability is important, how do we want it to be implemented in the procurement process? And even already in the definition of projects. So this was really decided, and together they said, if you think carbon is important, if you think the building process and the materials and design are important, let's use these 2 criteria. Because there are consultancy companies that make money by giving advice to each and every municipality, water board, ministry. No, we have something that's really, really clever. Let's do it like this. Let's put this in the contract. It's much more effective if you all use the same types. If you have a common goal, it is much more effective if you all have the same meet criteria. It's effective because you don't have to think about it yourself. So also local municipalities that don't have the capacity to come up with something new, they just start using what is effective, and industry knows exactly what they have to do to prove it. Now I'll go into the first one. I'll explain the DUBO means sustainable, and calc is from calculation. So this is the sustainability calculator. If you order a road, if you want to buy a road, on a functional specification, they can make their own design. If they are really clever and really technical, knowledgeable, they can make it thinner. But some other guys have thought, well, maybe we can use recycled asphalt. Some other company has thought of, we can use asphalt at a lower temperature. Everything is good for the environment. If you recycle is good, low temperature is good, if you use less is good. But we have to make some comparison. By the way, at the tender stage, they don't have to tell us how they are going to do it. The only thing they have to promise us, which will be in the contract, is the environmental footprint per square meter of road. So even if they don't really think about it, they can still, last time we did it like that, we should be able to get 5% lower. They start using it the same as they do their calculations of costs. So this was our challenge. How do you compare these types of solutions? Because if you come from very, very far away, there's a lot of driving involved. So it's not only the material, it's the driving, it's the processes. So you have to compare apples and oranges. We were so glad. There is an international standard where you monetize environmental effects. So there are 13 environmental, there are 13, I'm sure. So there are 2 more. 13 environmental aspects. There's a calculation method for 1 ton of carbon, a little emission of that, air quality. This is complex. But there is a calculation method that we didn't have to think about. It exists. If, for instance, for 1 kilometer of driving or for 1 ton of cement, if all those data is available, you can calculate how much damage does it cause to the environment. And luckily, in the Netherlands, all that data is available. We have a national database on environmental effects of building materials and processes. And I am quite certain that the companies in Lithuania, most of them also have that data in-house. If you have the data available, so it takes effort in a country if you start from scratch to get that data collected somewhere in an open source database, then you're able to do this. You can just say design A, design B, design C has a different environmental score. And you can use that score in different ways. You can use it as a meet criterion, you can use it as a minimum criterion, or I should say low is better here, it should be a maximum here. So you still have to think as a buyer for each project, our materials, what are the choices that the contractor is making? If it's about sourcing the material, we have projects where you have to bring in 6 million tons of sand. We're not telling them where to get it. So it is really something they have to think about. Are they transporting it by trucks or by ship or by pipeline? Are they getting it from very far away, from the sea even, or are they making somewhere a recreational swimming area? And do they combine something? If you want them to really think about this, so in our organization, people are looking at a project, think, what is going to happen here, and what are the main choices the contractor has to make? And on those choices, we focus the systems that we want you to think about the environmental effect of that choice. I will skip this. This is just to show you that the data exists. There is an international standard of collecting data for life cycle analysis. A lot of the data has to be available also from the European point of view, from the environmental effect declaration or the environmental product declaration. A lot of those data is available in industry. The only thing you have to do in a country, I'm saying it like it's easy, it's not, is to have that data made available. Of course, there are prices in there. So what I didn't show is you have those effects, and somehow in the calculation there are prices. This is not something you have to think of yourself, because this is an international standard that is agreed upon by scientists, which is using it in procurement. Like Timo was showing, you have to know, what was it, the test mark score. If you have to know what sort of scale to use. This is an accepted scale that can be used in procurement. Sorry, I was going too fast because I didn't read my own slide. As I said, you can use this as a minimum criterion, you can use it in meet criterion, but the important thing is, for us it works because we have it in a combination with functional specifications. What happens quite often is that people use meet criteria and they don't give the supplier the opportunity to do things differently. If you 100% tell them what to do, and they say, but now we're giving you a criterion, we want you to do it without carbon emissions, for instance, yeah, okay, then what can I change? Oh, maybe I can come with an electric car. Yeah, I found something. It might be totally irrelevant compared to the real choices that you have already made by not using functional specifications, but by making a design. So if you give someone a complete design, you have to build this, the amount of improvement is very limited. That is why we believe functional specifications give the most opportunity for your supplier to come up with more clever ideas. So this is the only thing that is in the contract. The most important thing. He can make a design, he can calculate what is my environmental footprint, and he immediately can see what is the discount that I will get when I'm compared with my competitor. And this is the sort of agreement we made with the asphalt industry. Over the years, the maximum will go down. So a company now already knows, if I'm not improving my installations, in 2026, I'm out of business. Or I don't get a meat bonus anymore. So this is the sort of discussions you need to have. This takes time to discuss with industry, but it's very effective. And just to show how effective it is to do things over the years, I want to these are individual projects, the same type of project. And you can see over the years, if you do it in the beginning, if you ask a contractor to think about it, 20% reduction is always easy, 20% better, whatever you ask. If it's delivery time, if it's carbon, if it's whatever. There will always be possibilities to be better. But the rest is just over time. That is the investment they made to do things really differently. Like in the beginning, they start using the best practices that already exist in industry. But over time, they come up with new ideas. And then you get huge reductions. So you have to be committed. I thought I would have the other presentation, but it's fine. There were two versions, and the other one now we would get the video straight on. Now I have to click the movie, I think, with control. Because the movie can explain it better than I can.
So, your organization wants to reduce its carbon footprint. Great for the world and for keeping down your expenses. What you'll need is the CO2 performance ladder. With this CO2 management system, you'll target CO2 reduction in a structural way. The higher you are on the ladder, the more you're doing to reduce CO2 emissions. Up to and including level 3, you concentrate on reducing the CO2 emission of your own organization. This begins with insight in the use of fuels, for instance. The emissions you'll reduce by taking measures. This can be done by investing in electric cars or energy-efficient devices. The CO2 performance ladder demands transparency. Both internally and externally, you'll communicate about your actions. You also share your knowledge with other organizations. From level 4 and 5 onwards, you'll work on the carbon footprint of your chain and sector. In collaboration with sector partners, you'll reduce the footprint of your supply chain. You'll also develop innovations with and for your sector. The CO2 performance ladder demands continuous improvement. Your organization will be assessed annually. If you meet all requirements, you receive a certificate. Organizations that use the CO2 performance ladder reduce twice as much CO2 and gain up to 10% in award advantage in tenders. Want to know what the CO2 performance ladder can do for your organization? Go to
Let's go back to the presentation. So this is a hugely effective system. It is a certification system for companies. So as was mentioned this morning, you're not allowed to ask something from a company. It has to deal with the project. So that was the thing we did. We're doing it exactly as the European procurement directives say. We ask at the project level, we never ask for the certificate. We ask for the things that the certificate, that you need to do to get the certificate. We ask those things at the project. And then we accept the certificate as proof. Because every time the audit is done at the company level, are you doing these things in your company? The systems work together. It is arranged that then the company has to present a list of the projects that they have to prove their carbon performance. And then the auditor takes a sample of, for instance, of the 12 projects and does the exact check is in these projects delivered what was promised? And of course, that is the way we accept this organization certificate as proof for what we have asked them to do in a project. And of course, we have to accept alternatives. But we make it so unclear about the alternatives that they don't dare to come up with the alternative. We give 5% reduction, because this is not just one set of things you have to do. We use, there is 5 levels of certificate. We only use the highest 3. If you have the level 3 demands, you get 3% reduction. If you have the level 5, you get 5%. The Railway Authority uses 10% as the highest, but we think this is already, this has made the whole industry in the Netherlands carbon aware. I will skip these. So there are 900 organizations that have these certificates. It's huge. And as was mentioned, they have to cooperate. If you are at the highest level, you have to do an innovation that comes up with a new measure for your industry to reduce carbon emissions. And it doesn't count if you keep it secret. They have to share it. In the beginning, that was a bit weird. So they had to organize an event where they were, we actually have a very good idea, and then their competitors were sitting there. And of course, then they were, we knew that all along. It's, maybe you think it's clever, but of course they didn't. But it's, so it's nice that competitors have to work together and learn from each other. And over 100 organizations use this in tenders. And of course, is it effective? I'm very glad that we can now tell that there was a comparison done by a university compared to the same type of organization with and without the certificate. The average carbon emission reduction in the industry is about 1.6%, and it's double for the companies that have the certificate. Our own ministry also has the certificate, because it just helps you to be aware what are the main things we can do. Oh yeah, that's nice. I added this one. Belgium is now also using it. Now the last part is just some examples. This is not something specifically for huge projects. The examples are both on the calculating thing, the DuboCalc, so the environmental cost indicator, and the carbon certificates. This is a bicycle path through the forest by a local municipality. It's used, not very difficult. They don't have a specific knowledge group of green procurement. They just took what was available, took the standard texts, added them in their contract. No discussions whatsoever, because their companies already know this way of working from many other projects where it is used. And this is, on the other hand, the largest types of projects. I think this is over 4 billion. So this is huge parts of the traffic network in the Netherlands, with tunnels, big bridges, biggest highways, 5 lanes on both sides. So this is extensive works in 5 plots. Also the same type of things are used in the contracts. And then what I find interesting is that we won a prize in 2016 for one of those plots. And the team that was doing that said, well, it's great, of course, that we get the prize, but we didn't do that much different than before, because this is already the standard way. Because in all the tenders we do, the carbon ladder, the certificate part, it's mandatory. In all the contracts, all the works contracts we do. The part about the calculation of the environmental cost indicator, that takes a little bit of knowledge. So we only do that of projects over 25 million. But then for each project, there is an evaluation. Will it have an effect if we do it in this project? What will be the aspect that we focus on? And if it will not have an effect, we don't do it. If we think, yeah, this is standard way. And of course, if it's an asphalt project, there's always the clause about the maximum in there. So these people, they were proud of it, but on the other hand, they were saying, we didn't do anything special within our own organization. It is already beginning to be the standard. So this is what we still think we want to achieve by using these criteria. And it helps just not only talk about the criteria, but what are the goals. We think, I'm not going to read all of it, but this is the things we want to do. Maybe the last one, We're not asking for energy production to be integrated in a road project, but if they do, they score huge on these meet criteria. So it is the sort of way of doing business that really stimulates them to think, wow, this is a project, and what can we do to help the government reach their goals? And I think it is very cost effective. We cannot even measure what it is costing more. It's also very low risk for them. And it has given the front runners of innovation the chance also to get more work. And I think that is what we want, that the companies that have invested in doing rational things, they get more work. And the price is not, well, we cannot even measure how much more expensive it is. But cooperation is essential. Cooperation between buyers and cooperation between buyers and your supply chain. That's what I wanted to tell you.